is 2-6. Try to fire. People, your left. Your left. Hey, shot. 2-2, 2-2. Hey, 2-3 alphas, 2-6.
Howdy, and welcome to Heart of a Volunteer Veterans Podcast, Saga Ep.021. We're in the big show now. I am Derek Knapp, and I will be your veteran guest host. So strap in, grab a cup of coffee, a Red Bull, a Rip It, maybe some matcha green tea or some warm water with lemon, whatever gets you going, as we dive into a little bit about me and what I'm up to these days.
Yeah. Derek, welcome to the show, brother. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How's your day?
Appreciate the invite.
How's your day going, man?
It's going good. You know, we've had a few dry days, which has been a blessing for us because we've been trying to cut this blasted hayfield. And so now we've had a chance to cut it and bale it. It's a glorious day.
I like that, man. I like that. I'm glad everybody got rain. You know, we were hurting all over the country for some rain, and I'm glad it spread.
Very tropical summer down here.
Yeah, I bet it's pretty humid. Hey, Derek, we're going to jump into your stuff, man. But let's jump into some veterans business. And like we talked before, you're more than welcome to chime in. Hey, everybody, this is kind of a new format we're using here for the Saga episodes, which is the Friday episodes. They're going to be called the Saga. The guest that comes on, our veteran guest, introduces the show, and they're actually completely a part of the show from beginning to end. Co-host, all right, jumping in. So you're more than welcome, Derek, to jump in if you know anything about some of the stuff we're going to be talking about. Here we go. All right, folks. Hey, this week been doing a lot of outreach to a lot of other Facebook pages, even like veteran journalism pages, trying to get a little bit of help. Getting some skills and also helping out some other veterans that have some shows. Obviously, we've got some veterans that we know that have their own shows. Bobby, Chris, and Justin. Marissa's going to be starting to show up here. We've got Pat Russell. He's got a show. He's warming up. So, getting those folks connected with some good veteran resources. So doing a lot of outreach with them and getting a lot of likes, shares, and really honest, good feedback from everybody. So, promoting the businesses, organizations, and individuals, that's what we do. And we're just going to keep on driving with that. Next Monday's episode, which is going to be Monday Mandatory Motivation episode 006, we're going to be interviewing Team River Runner with Marc Manilla. He is the chapter lead there at Fort Benning. He's going to be coming on and talking about what that organization does in that area and then across the country. If you remember me talking about this on the last episode with Steve Perchek, they took 5 blind veterans kayaking down the Colorado River and into the Grand Canyon. 226 miles, folks, in 12 days. If you can imagine what it would take, it took, from what I was reading, 25 kayaking guides in order to make that happen. That's the kind of work they do. And another veteran that they've really helped out with is Ryan Major, and we're going to try to get him on the show. He's a phenomenal young man, and I'm motivated just to meet him and be able to call him a friend. So we've got a lot of stuff going on, and it's just amazing stuff that they're doing there, Team River Runner. The other thing we've got is Staff Sergeant Aaron Butler Memorial Purple Heart Run. Once again, folks, that's going on 17 August in Eagle, Idaho. I put stuff on Facebook. You can find out the link to go register. There's a lot of folks that are coming from some pretty far away states just to be a part of it. I think we've got one here on the show that's doing that. Is that right, Derek?
That's right. That's right. Looking forward to actually driving up, and I can't say enough good things about this program in and of itself, what the goals that they have. But Dan Nelson, who was Aaron's team leader, he is one of those top-notch guys as a person, as a leader, as a war fighter. I just can't say enough good things about him. And he was a classmate of mine when we were in Infantry Officer basic course together. And so one thing that you try to do is surround yourself with good people, and Dan's one of those guys. So if you have an opportunity to be in the area or go be a part of this, or even promote it via all your social media avenues that everyone has these days, do it, because they're doing great things, and they're going to continue to do great things. And we are actually working on a 5K run that we're wanting to put together here in Texas next year. So stay tuned for that stuff.
Yes. Hey, folks, follow this page on Facebook. All right. Follow it. Do it now. You can keep listening to us. Just switch over there on your phone. Go to their page. Staff Sergeant Aaron Butler Memorial Purple Heart Run. Like their page. And if they need some help, lean forward. Help them out. Okay. Hey, once again, thank you for all the shares, the likes, the downloads. The veterans coming on are doing great work, cultivating resiliency in themselves and others, spreading the word, and coming on and having a good time. I mean, Steve Perchek's episode is actually blew up again. It just, I don't know what it is about Steve, but he brings people to their seats and opens their ears. So, Steve, once again, you're a two-time home run hitter here on the podcast. So thanks again, brother. Hey, we've been doing some reaching out a little farther than we normally would, but I'll tell you what, I reached out to the Australian Army Friends Facebook page, and they let me in, and I started talking in there, and they started to like the show, and we've got like 15 downloads coming out of New South Wales and Queensland. So I want to thank those mates for joining us, downloading, listening to our episodes, and I'm working on getting a few of them on the show. And at the same time, if there's any veterans, U.S. veterans that have served or had served overseas with some Australian Army, they have a podcast similar to this that is hosted by a veteran. If you're interested in that, we can send you on to theirs. And they'll send us some of theirs, and we'll do interviews and gain some perspective from, just a little bit of a cultural difference. So come up on the net if you've ever served with them, or you've got, or you'd like to do that.
Yeah, I tell you, the Australians are some cool cats. I've had a little bit of experience working with them overseas, but every time I meet one, I just feel like, Aussies are the Texans of the Southern Hemisphere. So we always get along splendidly. I
like that, man. You might fit in. You may have to do their show.
I may just have to. Yeah, they'll have me.
Well, I'll tell you what. This let's do this then. This will be your interview for maybe going on an Australian podcast.
Right, no pressure.
Or 5 or 6. Because here's the thing, Derek. If Texas is like Australia, then they're going to be like, hey, that's our Australian Texas brother. We got to have him on.
That's right.
And then you'll just do the gauntlet of podcasts over there.
Yeah, I'm down.
Maybe even take a vacation. I'd like to go there. No doubt.
Yeah, me too.
All right, man. Hey, people don't listen to this thing to hear me talk. They come here for the veteran guest, man. So the show is yours, my friend. Show is yours.
Well, I guess we should start in the beginning, as they say, and give a little bit of background about myself. And for those that haven't already put it together, that I'm a Texas boy. I grew up in what I consider to be a small town in South Texas, in Corpus Christi, and it's grown over the years. But back when I was there, it seemed like a small town, good place to grow up. I had a very typical, American type of upbringing. Had tremendous support from my parents all the time, and pretty much supported anything that I ever wanted to pursue. And also kind of having a ranch ranching heritage and a lineage, I was able to experience getting to grow up around horses and working cattle in my formative years, and something that's really stuck with me my whole life, and the lessons that you learn in that type of hard work. And so that really kind of got things started for me. And right out of high school, I was actually attending a local junior college to kind of get my basics out of the way as I was mulling my future, which included actually joining the military. And
Derek, hey Derek, did you have any military in your family?
My dad served, grandparents served all the way back, and then actually doing research, we found relatives serving all the way back to the Revolutionary War, including a cat by the name of Colonel James Swan, who apparently there's an island near Massachusetts named after him, because he, after we kind of kicked the British out, he negotiated buying some islands from them and using that to secure a fort that was built near there. So yeah, you could definitely say I have
I like how you call your great grandpa cat.
Yeah.
this cat. He was only a Colonel James Swan.
Yeah,
but this,
he had
but
to
this
be a
cat,
cool cat, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's funny, dude.
Yeah, so there's definitely that lineage there, and so my memory of that fall semester was I was kind of behind on a comprehensive reading exam, and so I'd gone to the library early that day, and remember being in the kind of coming down to the lobby to turn a book in and seeing just a horde of people around this big screen TV, and not really knowing what was going on. I went over there and asked somebody what had happened, and of course they had said something to the effect that somebody flew a small plane into one of the Twin Towers in New York. And I thought, well, that's weird. And as we were having that conversation, the second plane hit, and of course my first reaction was that our lives were changed forever, because knowing that wasn't something that was an accident, it really in effect changed a lot of people's lives, but mine specifically. So
how long did it take you to join after that?
Not long. I mean, I think I had the conversation with some family members that were currently in the military, and I had a conversation with a guy that I considered to be kind of a mentor at the time. His name's Chris Lyon, and he served actually during Mogadishu, was in the 82nd Airborne and was a part of their QRF back then. And he just said, my recommendation would be to you is just to finish your education and, do that, and then decide whether you want to go enlisted or become an officer, but you've got that education in the background. But, I would probably say not long after that, I started putting the groundwork into actually going enlisted. So, and then we can play more into that a little bit later, but yeah, so.
Yeah, man, I got to tell you, you've listened to the episodes, man, and we've talked before. It's like I have, if you have to layer respect, which you have to, some people get more respect than other people's get. The military service members that joined after September 11th, they have my ultimate respect. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Knowing what they're getting into. Now I get it. Us old crusties that were already in. I mean, we didn't have to re-enlist to stay in. We could have got out. So yeah, I get that too. But man, going down like days after and being like, I gotta go. That's bold.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is. It's what makes Americans.
Yeah, and for me, I always thought to myself, I have all of the things going for me that you need to be able to serve in the Army. That's physical attributes that make me the type that if I wanted to go and join, I didn't have anything like bad vision or something that they may not allow me to go in. And I always thought, if not me, then whom? And I've still taken that mantra even to this day of what I'm doing in my current gig. But I think that it's something that anybody who's ever joined after 9/11 should be proud of, is that they were a part of that. Because even considering the amount of the veterans that are coming out of the military and have served since then, it's still a relatively minuscule number comparatively to the size of our nation. And so a lot of people have carried that load, and they deserve that respect.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
So kind of moving forward, I did the enlisted thing. I went to basic training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and did AIT and became a 13 bang bang. And I'm still very grateful for that, because, there's all these things that you experience that build your toolkit, if you will, for later on in life, and having a very good understanding of artillery and having a good understanding for calling for fire on all of those things obviously played a very key role in my success in the Korengal and afterwards. And so having that, helped me understand and envision how that whole process works, what they need to be successful. And had I just gone in and become a 11 Bravo, I probably wouldn't have had that. So having those other additional skill sets certainly help you as you move forward in your career.
What'd you think about basic, man? Were you prepared for it? I mean, physically?
Yes, I felt like when I was helping my uncles clear pastures and turn, big thicket full pastures that had nothing, full of nasty, thorny weesash and mesquite trees, and turning that into a hayfield and going up and down the roads, picking up rocks and throwing them into a bucket. That was one of the first times that I thought to myself that I was going to get an education, because I wasn't going to do this for the rest of my life. So I felt like even in basic training, when things, are definitely new and different, I always thought to myself, this still isn't as bad as, picking up rocks in 100+ degree weather. Right. So I think for me, it was more of figuring out, how to not be that guy that gets the rest of the unit smoked, or figure out what they were looking for to be successful. And I mean, I always joke about this. It always seems to be that I'm put in a leadership position. I remember, I think the second or third day of being at basic, where you get right out of them basically showing you and being your daddy on how you're going to tie your shoes and where you're going to put your, stuff in your locker. I was made platoon guy right away, and I was a platoon guy the entire time I was in basic and AIT. So, I guess they saw a leadership quality in there. But
how old were you in basic?
Early, I was 20, 21 or 22, something like that.
So you weren't.
So I was a little bit older, and that's probably
guy.
Why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always good to have them older guys. I had an old dude. He had thick glasses too, bro. And I remember, they called us all recruits, and he was the only guy in the platoon. No one called him recruit.
Right.
They called him by his last.
Right.
The drill instructors did, but called him recruit. Right. Actually, one of them used to call him old man.
Yeah.
And that's when you could do that, and it was pride. It was prideful. Now it just,
I had my bunkmate. His last name was Klein, I believe, and he was about 36 or 37 and had gotten a waiver, and he also was not the brightest bulb. I think he barely got the ASVAB minimum to be a 13 bang bang, which is saying something. And but I remember, it was the same thing. They had a hard time getting on him, because he had more gray hairs than most of the drill sergeants. So
right.
That was funny.
Yeah, it would be tough, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never been over there to Fort, so I need to go over there, hit the PX. I gotta get it.
There's really nothing to it. I mean, Fort, a lot in Oklahoma is the same. I mean, it's we got a break once and got to go see a low rent wrestling competition, and then their big parade. And putting it in perspective, it was wonderful at the time, because you got a little bit of a break. But gosh, it's some of those military towns, man, they're pretty sketch.
Yeah.
But so moved on from that, and then finished my education side, and then got my commission, and then went right into. And it's funny that how all the paths go. I had initially planned on going aviation, actually, and went through the whole physical and aviation, and took the AFAS, did well on it, because I had a couple of buddies who were in classes ahead of me that were, kind of pushing me in that direction, because you had potentially some, job security after military life. And I remember I was actually able to change to go into infantry because I had a buddy who was sitting there at flight school, and he'd been there like 18 months and hadn't even graduated off his basic airframe because all of the aircraft were so tied up in Iraq and Afghanistan that they didn't actually have enough advanced airframe. So he was like, I'm literally probably going to pin captain before I even leave Rucker. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I want to be tip of the spear. I want to be out there. I want to be in it. And so I was able to fortunately change to infantry. And the fact that I had a flight physical and all those things made it easy for me because I didn't have to go back and get my Ranger physical and all that other stuff. And so that's kind of how I transitioned to being infantry, and I couldn't have imagined being anything other, so it's funny how those things kind of transcend. And then once I commissioned, did the typical year-long vacation at Fort Benning School for Wayward Boys, and
right.
Went to Bullock 2 and Infantry Officer Basic course, and they stuck me in a couple other courses like Mechanized Leader course and things like that. You went to the sniper employment officers course too, right? Yeah. I did that as well. Went to a javelin course as well, which is funny because then when we had the opportunity to use the javelins in Cornwall, I think I was one of the only ones that was certified on them, so that helped as well. And then you kind of do that while you're waiting for Ranger dates to open up, and then went to Ranger school, and that's where I first met you, which is a funny story. And then from there, it's funny. I literally graduated from Ranger school, was at the LTO, which is what they call the Lieutenant Transition Office there at Benning, and had not gotten orders yet, actually. I was waiting on orders. Those came, it felt like overnight. Got the orders, found out I was going to Carson, so it was like, whoa. Didn't even know anything about Carson really because it was one of those duty stations that was kind of elusive. It was hard to get. And so I got to Carson and was about a week, in processing, and then got to 212, fully expecting to be put on staff or to be kind of hanging around until they found a place for me. But I got there, and the same day that I met the brigade commander and sergeant major, I was headed down to the company and getting a platoon, which you talk about drinking from a water hose, a fire hose rather.
That was Colonel George, right?
No, it was Colonel Pearl.
Oh, the battalion commander.
Yeah, battalion, yeah. Colonel Pearl, and met Sergeant Major Sasser, and then went right in and met my company commander, and was given a platoon, the keys to the proverbial car, and it was an experience. At the time they were going through, they didn't have a lieutenant, and they'd had a platoon sergeant there for a while who was actually, I believe, either retiring or getting medically discharged. And so they just weren't kind of in that mindset of getting ready for what we were going to go do. And I didn't find out we were going to the Cornwall until, my battalion commander had alluded to it, and then company commander really told me what we were doing. And then, of course, that night I went home and Googled it and was like, oh my God, what are we getting into? And I really had less than 2 months to get the platoon ready from the time I met them to when we were pushing out to Afghanistan. So
that's crazy, dude. You know what? Hey, what do you think about your level of preparedness coming in there, but coming right out of? I mean, you're no spring chicken, man. You've been in for just for a little bit.
Right.
Coming in, knowing both sides, and coming right out of Ranger school. I mean, I know you're kind of broke down, but at the same time, you're ready.
You're still in that mindset, though.
Yeah, you're ready.
I think in my mind, as soon as I came out and knew I was going to a unit that was deploying, I didn't know where we were deploying to, but I think you just kind of keep that mindset of, I have a little bit of a break here of, I kind of get to do what I want, eat what I want, whatever, but I'm thinking to myself, I need to stay sharp and stay focused, because you never want to be responsible for making a bad decision or a decision out of weakness that could cost you or your soldiers' lives. So for me, I kind of kept in that mindset, and being a little bit older and knowing what the typical private or what the typical lower enlisted person may be thinking about, because in the back of your mind, you're going, hey, I'm deploying. I may not ever come home. I want to have a good time and enjoy whatever time I've got before I, head overseas. And, we didn't really have that luxury of where we were going. So I always knew that we and our company commander, was Captain Marc Manilla at the time, had the same mindset that, it would be better to be overtrained and go over there and come back than to be undertrained or give a lot of passes and us not be prepared for, arguably one of the most comedic and dangerous places you could go in the world at the time.
Yeah, so. That place is pretty austere, dude.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'll say this. I got there, like a couple of weeks before, maybe even, I think it was like 2 weeks before we left.
Yeah, it was very short.
And I was impressed with the PT, the level of the spread of people across the company. It was good, man. I was lucky that I came from 5th RTB.
Yeah.
And so the mountains that was my world.
Right. Right.
So when they told me that, I already knew what the Korengal was, and when Sergeant Major Johnson told me that, I was like, it raised my eyebrows, and I'm like, oh shit, that's like you said, man, that's the big show, and I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, what's funny is Colorado couldn't have been better suited for where we were going from the elevation,
absolutely,
and the level of terrain that we had, and I always wondered, why the Army didn't look at that more strategically and utilize those units that are in those areas and send them to specific regions or zones based on, that they're around it every single day. And you really can't train for that being somewhere else. And so I feel like us constantly training on the incline, hitting the mountains, being in that elevation really did help us and give us a leg up on even the unit that we replaced, because when we would go, even in our initial kind of walk through, left seat, ride, really mountain hike as opposed to a ride, we were better conditioned than they were, and they'd been there a whole year. And that was partly just because we, we're lucky enough to be in that situation to leverage that to our favor.
Right. Hey, I'll tell you this here, man. I can't remember this dude's name. I was talking to this AWG guy after the Korengal, and he was saying that one of the differences, if you come from an area where you're actually walking and doing mountain goat work, where your feet, you've trained your feet to step where they need to step, and you keep watching. I don't know. I kept thinking about that after he said that's like one of the skills that when you take there, especially like to those mountainous environments, missing out on an ambush, seeing it happen before it happens, seeing indicators, you can't be looking at the ground.
Right, exactly.
And that was the thing that when I would go out with the platoons and I would watch them operate, every soldier, except for the new ones that showed up, it took them a little time to get their eyes off the ground.
Right.
But these guys were in scan mode. And that was one of the things I never, ever said anything about that, because that was just, do your thing, guys, because you're doing exactly what you've been trained to do.
Right.
And that's, I think that's another difference, man. It's the environment. Having that mentality built into it was a godsend. I think it was definitely a layer of that saved lives. Period.
Yeah, and I think for me, being older, it was not a detriment in whatsoever. It allowed me to be a little bit more seasoned. Also, just in how I approached people and felt more comfortable, even dealing in those shuras and all of those things, because you don't feel like a kid coming right out of college, and then you go to your unit and you show up, and it may be the first time that you've ever lived out on your own, or ever lived out like having to pay your own bills and things like that. Like when I was in those shuras, I felt like I'm a grown man. Let's have grown man conversations. You know what I mean? And I think that helped as well in having a level of confidence. So
right, yeah. No, I agree, man. It's like when you're when you're the main shit stain, man, you got to have your emotions in check.
Right.
In almost everything you do. I mean, you and I were talking about some of the missions that we went on, when it was just like us, and it was like, we got to go here, and it's like, are you serious? we'll go, but are you serious? But as soon as you walk out the door, it's a unified front, and you can't waver one bit, or the whole mission failed.
Right.
Before it even got started.
And that was one of the first times that I was able to really impart, that methodology of leading from the front, because you hear that all the time: lead from the front, Rangers lead from the front, and all of those things. And we lead the way, and you get the concept of that. But then when you're over there, you realize what that really means. Of leading from the front sometimes means that you have to lead out, or that you have to kick things off, because you have to instill that level of confidence in your guys. Because if everyone sits there and does the whole not it thing, then it creates this, this over encompassing vibe of nobody really wants to go out and do, meat eater things, and we were not in an area of operation where you had that situation where if you showed weakness, or you showed that you weren't full down on the gas pedal, that they were going to let up on you. And I always noticed that certain firefights where it seemed like they had really gotten the upper hand on us, or that we weren't firing back, or we weren't initiating contact or responding to contact, or reacting rather, with the same level that they were giving us, they would put the gas pedal down. And then now you're really because now they're emboldened. Now you really got a problem in your hands. So, that was something I always tried to instill in my guys, is that, we're not always going to get the advantage to be able to engage first, but we're going to hit them so hard that when they do, they're really going to second guess ever pulling the trigger again, because they're going to know that if they try to ambush us or shoot us on an exfil, that we're going to bring down the hammer of God and really make them think twice. But, and use all of our assets at our disposal to make that happen. So.
And you did that very successfully, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
I still remember, hearing you call in, especially like setting up the mortars. Of course, they're already laid on, that's just good mission prep on your part. And as soon as the call came in, it was like, yeah, Derek's getting ready to lay some smoke. And then Blessing's guns would start kicking, and then aircraft would come from outside the valley ready to go. Right. And they'd be like, yes, well done.
Well, and also understanding of, what are the limitations of all of your assets.
Absolutely,
and then the enemy knows those too. How do you use those to your advantage, or whether you change the methodology of what you're engaging with first, or vice versa, or using the cover of artillery coming in, so that kind of masks the aircraft coming in. I mean, certain things that you just really think through, because that's what that was all about. It was the ultimate chess game. Yeah. And you knew that they were sitting there and they were planning on how to kill you and your men, and that's not something that you take lightly. So how do you put your tactical plan together at your level that you can control, to where you're the most effective? Because there wasn't an option of us going out. There wasn't an option of us keeping the footprint pushed out, because we know what had happened before we had gotten there, other bases getting overrun. And so my thought process was, it would be great to sit here and play video games, or hang out with my guys, or call mom and dad or whomever on the phone at home. But to me, I'd rather be outside the wire, making these guys always have to be on their toes, and keeping them aware of the fact that we could go anywhere at any time if we really wanted to. And so that was really kind of my approach.
Hey, Derek, that first clip that played when the show started, I sent that to you. Do you recognize that?
Yeah. After I listened to it a couple of times, I don't know where you got that. I don't know if you got that on the dark web or what, but
dark interwebs, man.
That was a firefight where we were pushing up into a village called Darbart, and as we were pushing up into there, we had gotten a tip that there were a couple of enemy combatants that had pushed up into an area that we thought we could get to and traverse to kind of close with on them. And as we were moving up, we realized that we possibly could be coming into kind of a complex ambush type scenario. And so that clip is us actually getting hit at the very top of the village. It goes from these kind of broken down homes into just if you can imagine being on the top of a long spur or a long hilltop that's longer than it is wide, and being at the top of that, we were engaged, and this is me where we had pushed down into one of those broken down homes, and I'm trying to call for fire, get a thumbs up on where all my guys were, that they weren't engaged. We didn't have any casualties. And so I think that's just the crosstalk as we're taking incoming fire.
Hey, I remember this because I was outside the building 100 meters down the trail towards the cop.
Right.
Hiding behind a rock that was the size of a sandbag. When it kicked off,
right.
I dropped, and like we talked about, man, it's the second time in my life that a bullet danced in front of me. It just spun. It hit something and spun right in front of me, and then it just disappeared. And I was like, "You gotta go."
Yep.
Let's take a listen to this, man, and then
let's go for it.
and then let's talk about it.
Little blast of the past.
On your left. On your left. Hey, shot! 2-2. Hey! 2-3 alphas, 2-6.
That was good, Rich.
Hey! Hey! Roger, on the mortars impact.
What do you think about that, man?
Yeah, it really sucks you in.
Holy shit.
You realize that over the course of that deployment, you had many of those firefights. And, one of the beauties of being in one of those situations is working with your guys and having a game plan. And when you're briefing those operation orders, they can get mundane. But I actually remember before we stepped out on this mission, being very specific about, if we get engaged, these are the things that we need to do. And you could hear there, Goodrich, who unfortunately since has passed away, was one of my FOs. And because of the type of deployment that we were on, I went through quite a few FOs. But, in that particular instance, he had already known the game plan. And I was able just to give him the nod and him start working the fires net while I'm trying to get accountability and also direct the fire that I had of where the guys were able to get some mass fire on those locations. As you can hear, there's a lot going on. And, the cacophony of all of the engagements, including of being in that room and it just becoming an echo chamber, you really can see how it gets chaotic pretty quick.
Yeah, hey folks, that was Christopher Goodrich. He was the FO there. He actually 6 days later, I think Goodrich got shot, and then of course he died. Him and his wife passed away in a motorcycle accident down by San Diego a few years ago. So, hey, I heard Edwin on there too.
Yeah,
yelling. Yeah.
Boy, he had him on there, and then
he
always Sanchez.
He always had combat voice, dude.
Oh yeah,
Edmund did. I always liked that dude. Combat voice.
Yeah, he was, and he always he was that guy who came to every mission prepared, where he had like 3 or 4 smokes and tons of grenades, and every time he give you the nod, like, can I throw one? Like, he'd been waiting the whole mission to pop that smoke or whatever. And so he was always Johnny on the spot with that. And then you can hear Doc Sanchez in there as well, maneuvering and trying to get a hands on if we've got anybody who's down. So that's the beauty of being in a leadership position where you really trusted your guys enough, and that you got seasoned enough that even when you're in something chaotic like that, that pretty much became our daily op tempo. And I look back on it and go, just 1 or 2 of those firefights could have defined you for the rest of your life. But we experienced, an untold amount of those type of engagements. And so being able to depend on your guys and then be getting better and better and better and more efficient at it, to where then you could predict the ambush or the engagement and be able to tell, okay, well, that shutter's closed. Well, so are they signaling, to the enemy combatants that, it's go time? All these little things that you're able to pick up on that made you effective and made us able to go out and actually engage and destroy these guys, and really make them think twice about hitting the patrols that were out or hitting the bases that were there as well. because that's something else you contended with, is that you get off back from a long patrol and then get all settled in and think, you're going to be able to take a little power nap, and then, you get a base attack. So, it was just one of those things that was always ongoing.
Well, that's the nice thing, Derek, is, with you being enlisted, I still like, man, the way that you and your platoon sergeant worked, you and Reed.
Yeah.
A well-disciplined platoon, well-disciplined. When you're back on the cop, and especially out on mission, and that says a lot, man. Especially in that environment, it's real easy to be like, we weren't at Blessing. We were a long ways from Blessing.
Oh, yeah.
Out there just doing our thing. It's easy to let your standards fall.
Yeah, we could have gone native pretty easy.
But you guys didn't do that. You kept it tight. And I'm telling you, man, that's that kind of stuff. People are like, I'm sure they say the same thing about me, and they probably say it about you, a couple of them. This, that, or the other. But, when you look back and it's like, but did anybody die?
That's exactly right.
We did.
It's hard to balance. You want to be the whole thing of being everybody's friend is a farce, in the sense that you can't be everybody's friend. And when it comes to mentoring your soldiers, now I think there is something to being able to figure out how to leverage every soldier to their maximum potential, which is different, very similar in the civilian world as well. But over there, my biggest thing is that was my responsibility, was to go out and we had to be kinetic. This was not a valley or a scenario where the people loved us. The people wanted us to build roads and build wells and fix their all of their crop machinery. It wasn't about that. We were in a place that was hostile, and the villagers didn't want us there, and they made that known on many occasions. And so it was, our backs were against the wall as far as no one's going to give us any relief. And so if I've got to be hard on the guys, or I've got to be specific, or I've got to make sure that they may have just come back from a patrol, but we're still going to do platoon PT or squad PT or whatever, because we've got to be at our best at all times, or go to the range. We did a lot of range stuff, or always keeping our weapon system dialed in, because and sometimes you go out there and you feel like you're engaging an area and you think your bullets are going nowhere, but why have a weapon system that's not dialed in, that in that moment you're in a close combat type situation, or you have the ability to engage somebody, that your weapons are dialed in, and you're not wishing you would spend a little bit more time at the range. So those are all the little things and giving the guys downtime for sure, but also keeping them engaged as well. And keeping them from not losing too much focus, because we had a lot of situations where we had to QRF stuff. I remember when Bettis came on, when Brandon came on and talked about some of those water drops that went awry, and we're literally QRF in our own water, because we're about to get into it with the villagers and the ANA about water. Well, that's a logistical item we definitely need. So I remember having to throw on kit right quick in a hurry. And so those are other parts of this that. Well,
one of them shot at us across the airfield.
Yeah.
I was out there. It was like, what are you doing, guys? Shooting at the gate?
Shots across the bow, man, over some water. Yeah. And that was another thing too. That is one thing that I feel like we were blessed in, is that our counterparts, for the most part, is where we were doing the Shona to Shona, shoulder to shoulder stuff. And we never really had those. We had a few instances where green on blue could have happened, but I feel like that was one less thing that we were blessed enough to not to have to deal with, is green on blue. Because you remember right after that, green on blue became something very common everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I look back on that thinking that was one thing that we got lucky on, is that most of those dudes, for the most part, if we were out on patrol, they were pretty squared away as much as they can be. But yeah, I guess that's something we've never really talked about.
Well, hey, I got to tell you, man, I used to, we locked up the soda conics.
Right.
When I got there, but I would not hesitate to go down and unlock that thing, or be like, hey, take some soda down to the ANA.
Right.
Dude, you give them a case of soda, they don't shoot anybody.
That's right.
They don't. They don't come and steal your stuff.
And you assume that when you're going on a patrol, they've had all the same, lickies and chewies and water and food and everything, and that wasn't the case. Some of those dudes, they just didn't have that luxury. So
no, I think we took pretty good care of them, man.
I agree.
We did. Even after they got a little froggy down there, I think we still did a pretty good job with them.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were good. They were good guys. So let's talk about some of your big hitters. Talk about your squad leaders, man. I like squad leaders.
So we had, like I said, when I first came to the unit or the platoon, most of these guys had been together since Korea. Yeah. So right when we had gotten there, the unit had moved from Korea to Ft.Carson, and then was reflagged from 2ID to 4th ID. So they had actually also come back from a very, very tough deployment in Dora, Iraq, I believe 07, 08. So some of these guys really only had about a year before they went into someplace else that was extremely kinetic. And so most of these soldiers, or the squad leader up or team leader up, they've been together since basic or right after. And so they had developed a very cohesive family. And so I had to come in and essentially convince these warfighters that had already been there, done that, to trust in me and trust when we went outside the wire that I was squared away enough to lead them. So I had, we had Ferralis, we had Sergeant Flores, who left early because he was still dealing with some
hernia,
nagging injuries from 82nd. He had come from the 82nd and had some bad injuries with his ribs that never healed. And
he had a mesh. He had mesh that was.
He had a surgery, right?
It ruptured.
Yeah, exactly. So he went home, and then
hesitantly, he didn't want to leave.
Oh yeah, no. I remember him messaging me all the time, trying to check in as best we could on a unsecure net, and apologizing profusely for leaving. And I know that that's hard when you leave in that scenario. And so we had Edwin, and he is now up in Oregon, working with the Forest Service. I actually got to be one of his references, which is always awesome. So he's up there and loving it, from what I can tell. And then
I'd like to have Edwin on here, man. I've always liked Edwin. He's not only was he a good NCO, he just had a good heart, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He just had a good heart.
And then I also ended up getting Manilla and Antron Bailey. Those are some of the other guys that I had, and they were both from 1st Platoon when they moved over from Vegas. And they're all squared away in their own rights, and being able to depend on those guys, because really, when we were up there, it was really about 16 guys is what we took out, and then half of my other element was also occupying OP Dallas, which was an interesting thing in its own right, because they had to deal with a lot of not only base attacks to their outposts, but they had village, the village elders in the surrounding villages really did use kids and used women to do a lot of probing missions. They would have to deal with making some really split-second decisions on them trying to steal claymores or steal cameras or do all that kind of stuff. And so those guys were always, calling with these questions on, what are we supposed to do? This kid's low crawling up here, and he could have a grenade on him, or he could have a whatever. And so they didn't get a lot of rest over there either. So that was pretty much a rotation. Half my unit was there, and half my unit was outside the wire with me. And then we'd rotate, and I'd get a fresh set of legs of guys that had some downtime in the OP, and then we would push out. So, but when you're out there in no man's land, there's nobody. You could be 100 meters straight line distance across the valley from another element, and they're an hour from you.
Yeah.
So when we got to certain places, if we got into it, there's no one coming to QRF you in that sense. So we always had to pretty much, be game on.
So Derek, what after? How did your Korengal deployment end? What was that like?
Well, we actually, once we got the word, we actually were visited by General McChrystal at the time, was the commander of ISAF, and all the forces over in Afghanistan. He actually came out and visited us, which looking back on it was pretty amazing. And I can't remember if he pinned on my CIB or my Purple Heart, but I remember him standing there, and he's a tall guy, and he, they don't really make 4-star rank tapes that they put on your uniform, but I remember he put it on, and he's a taller guy, and so he looked down at me when he was, I think it was my CIB he pinned on, and he said, "You're going to remember this." And I thought, I'm going to remember it because I'm getting my CIB pinned on, but I realize it's because, the highest ranking dude there is pinning it on to you. And, he had his own lore and legend from being SF and a Ranger and all those things. And so he kind of gave us a pep talk and was really thankful for what we were doing. Actually went out on a patrol with us. I mean, he's just a very, the kind of guy that commands the room, and that's putting it lightly. But I remember I kind of wondered after he left why he had come. And then shortly after that, we kind of notified everybody that we were shutting the Korengal down, which was very tough for us because we didn't want to be the unit that was closing it down, because it was going to be seen as us being the ones that gave up, or we got tired of the fight and wanted to, tuck tail and run, which was certainly not, our MO. But when we decided to close it down, I think that they're still doing, all kinds of officer professional development, and how we were able to do that, I think it kind of set some land speed records with how we shut the valley down as quickly as we did, and not having any major casualties or any major loss of equipment, and doing all of these night PESH runs, pulling all the equipment out and all the operations that we were doing. I mean, it was really a whirlwind.
And trying to be tricky at the same time. Right.
So, and trying to negotiate once they kind of put 2 and 2 together of negotiating, look, if you want to start playing, games with us, then we'll make sure that there's nothing left for you. And so that all went as well as it could have in my mind, and I was proud of that. And then because my unit wasn't at OP Restrepo or at OP Vegas or Fire Base Vegas, we finished our deployment at Kopp, Michigan, which if anyone's been to Kopp, Michigan or knows anything about that, it's right at the mouth of the Korengal Valley in the Pesh River Valley. And so it is as hotbed as it can get. And the only difference is that the Kopp, Michigan was literally down in a bowl. I mean, every mountain peak basically looked straight down on it. So just from the enemy being able to mass their fires on us was a relatively easy thing. And so we ended up finishing the last 30 days or so at Kopp, Michigan, doing joint missions with Dagger Company. And we were the dismounted element, which I liked. And so we were able to show a little bit of different style to the enemy that were there. And because we were so used to being aggressive and kind of, if we saw something we wanted to go do or go after, that we would do that. And so we did a lot of night missions where they would drop us off and we'd go on a little walkabout. And so I got a little bit different exposure. I got to see parts of the valley that I wouldn't have seen had we stayed in the Korengal. Kind of got to see how the other guys fought and what their the type of missions that they ran, and most of them were mounted. And so that's a whole different, complexity in and of itself. And this was right when the MATVs were being pushed out to the forces. And so there were some learning curves with those vehicles' capabilities. So once again, it was something else to experientially see, which helped later when I came back to Afghanistan later in my career and was in the kind of Kandahar province area and being in a mounted situation and knowing what those vehicles are able to do and not do. So that's kind of how I finished up my my service there in the Korengal. So
how was your other deployment? Maybe was it any highlights there? Or
I would say that this was during the time period where there were a lot of green on blues. The unit that we replaced had a green on blue. So one of their master sergeants had been killed. And so that in and of itself is a thing that you have to go work with the unit where you have that happen. And we worked with a Colonel Haji Janan, which incidentally, he was killed last year. He was one of the higher ups in the Afghan border police. And so it was a very high profile mission. And once again, it's like the stuff you learn. We literally would go out, and it seemed like once a week we would be with them and we would find a giant weapon cache. Or because I had experience in that and doing controlled demolitions, we would work and help train one of their lieutenants who was trying to become EOD certified. And so we actually put an EOD certification together with the Air Force EOD teams where this guy could get certified and learn how to dispose of all these roadside IEDs. And so it would be funny is here I am supposed to be on this low-key SFAT mission, and next thing you know, I'm on, AFN because we found another, weapons cache, and we're doing this large controlled detonation that shuts down the whole, RC South and all this stuff. But really for that deployment, to me, comparatively to the Korengal, it was more of a people challenging mission. The units that we worked with, working with the Afghan border police and knowing that here we have this mission to train these guys to be like us, but they're never going to be like us because they're not from Western civilization, and we would issue them all this equipment, Humvees, the whole nine. And then within a week or two, half the Humvees are missing, or something's gone on where you realize they've sold them to the Taliban or whatever's happened to them. So it was always a very interesting. Yeah.
We had guys that sold brand new engines out of Hiluxes, put old engines in and sold the new engines.
Right, exactly. It was this very similar stuff, and just realizing that we call it corruption, but to them it's just another day at the office. And so dealing with that and dealing with the differences in ROE, we actually, while I was there, we had a Dust 1 with a soldier that they thought had been kidnapped and put in a vehicle and was being taken to the Pakistan border. And right where we're right there near Chaman, which is the biggest pedestrian crossing in Afghanistan. And so then we spent like a 5-day, 24-hour operation being down at the border, literally inspecting and scanning every single vehicle that there was. And so that was another experience of just the massive humanity that goes across that border, and being very vulnerable, because there you are doing these 24-hour operations. There's only so many configurations you can put your vehicles and guys in when you're doing these vehicle searches that, you count your lucky stars that someone didn't come with a giant IED, which, at the time we had somebody in our higher headquarters element get killed from that very thing, where they were driving up and down the road in a vehicle just looking for a unit to hit, and they just happened to be the unit that was pulling out a calf, and they got hit.
Yeah.
So, you have to be thankful and feel blessed in that department. But I would say, like, looking back, it was different in its own right, but that's kind of why I said, we're in the big show now, because when you look at the Korengal, that was really, you don't really get any higher up in the visibility from the unit, from the national attention, all of the different types of news sources that came out, the amount of aircraft that we were able to get, which was wonderful because of all the operations orders and all the CONAPs that were being sent up and storyboards. That allowed us to get all of the aircraft that we needed, because I can stand here and say, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the mortar teams. I wouldn't be here because of the A-10s and the Air Force aircraft and the CCA that we got, and the guys that are flying in those scout helicopters with no doors, coming and doing gun runs with their M4s type things. I mean, that was the kind of dedication we had in the Valley. And to us, we were heroes to them, because they just couldn't imagine what we were going through, but without them, we wouldn't be here. And, I think it would be great to at some point do, kind of just a special segment on the mortar team.
Yeah,
because those guys were as professional as it got, and they weren't just sitting there slinging mortars from the safety of the outpost. They were having to do that while they were being decisively engaged, or while they were being, dealing with incoming, Dishka or rocket rounds, or
that was the thing, man. Sully was down there, but man, they literally would engage the mortar's hooch, and they wouldn't even be able to get out of the building, and somehow they would get out like the back or the side, and then all of a sudden it'd be like, we got rounds, and there'd be like rounds coming out. And then once they got them out, man, it was a game changer.
Yep.
It game changed, and they tried to pin it down. Well, we ended up moving, giving them like alternate firing positions all over the cop.
Right. When I remember when Keating and Fritchie happened, we had to put some parameters in place that if they were to try something like that, we would have to have some alternate locations to set up all of our weapon systems for that. And, that's just, once again, planning on our part. And a couple other things to highlight from the Korengal, I think, was the fact that we were very dynamic. Not to take away from any of the other units that were there, but, I think the fact that we really did pride ourselves on being able to say, if we had some type of ISR asset, some type of predator feed or whatever, that we caught some guys exfilling or had the opportunity to go after them, we would go after them. We wouldn't just say, well, it's too risky. We would get up in the middle of the night, and I remember I was on the treadmill like 9 o'clock one night, and I'm just PTing away, and I remember Captain Reddy came over and he was like, hey, we got this ISR feed. We know where these guys are at. I want you to go, try to roll them up. It's like, okay, where is it? He's like, oh, it's over there by OP Vegas. And you're like,
on the Habit Squad.
By Firebase Vegas? Yeah. So it's like a 4-hour hike. He's like, yeah, you need to do it like in 3, or else you're not going to get there without hitting daylight. It's like, okay, I guess I better let my guys know, So there you are, running out there and like telling your dudes, you need to be at the gate in 15 minutes, and we're stepping off, and being able to go do that, and not only just get there, but actually find these guys and, interdict them and come back with all kinds of, things that we could have used from an intelligence standpoint. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Being able to do those kinds of things and looking back on that and realizing that there will never be another experience. And I think that's, for me too, why it was easy for me to get out and transition back into civilian life, is because I knew I was never really going to ever do anything that was going to be on that level from a combat or from a leadership standpoint. So for me personally, I was able to walk away from it having the experiences that I had. Some people, they want to stay in kind of chasing that, but for me, just kind of being a realist in that department, that was as good as it got in that. As far as being an infantry officer and being, on the ground and being as physical and as physically demanding as that was, you just can't get any better than that.
Well, Derek, you did an outstanding job, man. Your the energy, the focus,
thank you,
the dedication you put into it. I mean, I know your guys are thankful. I'm thankful for having you, in the company. Leading the platoon.
Well, I appreciate that.
It's amazing, man. Hey, so let's talk about transition, man. So after doing, enlisted, going officer, Korengal, and another Afghanistan deployment, what is what are you looking like right now? What are you feeling like getting out?
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, being able to make the transition and being able to be where I'm at now really is the fact that I was able to hold on, I got somebody knocking on my door. I'll figured it out. Is that when you look at what was going on at the time when I got out, I got off kind of when we were trying to ramp down in Afghanistan, and which at the time you never know if that's going to happen or not. But for me, that last deployment, I had both my grandparents on my dad's side pass away, and my brother's graduating from college and doing all these other things, and you just go, I'm ready to be home. I'm ready to be back in Texas, and so that was a big part of it. And then feeling like that there was something that I needed to be doing. In the back of my mind, I had a desire to get out, and I don't really know why, but I felt like I was ready to start the next chapter. I didn't really know what the next chapter was going to, hold, but I knew it was time to start that. So when I got out, I was able to get right away, and I know some guys really struggle with finding work when they get out, but I was able to get a program management role at Flextronics here in Austin, Texas. And then right after that, I kind of got promoted as being an operation manager and having a lot of employees and all that stuff. And that was fulfilling in its own right, but I still felt like I wasn't really in something that was really leveraging the skills that I had. And during that time period, I'd gotten back into my ranching heritage and had a couple of my own personal horses, and was just kind of getting connected back into that. And then in parallel, I found out about, at the time, a program called Veterans Equine Therapy Services, or otherwise known as VETS. And the parent organization to that was the Joyful Horse Project, which was a nonprofit that had been created after the really, really awful fires that happened here in Bastrop, Texas. And lots of people were displaced. Lots of people, their horses were displaced because they didn't have a place for them to come back to. And so the nonprofit was created to house those horses and basically hold them for the owner, and while they got their lives back on track. And then during that process, Beth Rand, the founder of the program or the organization, she went and visited the Center for the Intrepid, the Fisher House, and Warrior Transition Unit down there in BAMC and Fort Sam in San Antonio. And she was very moved by all of these guys and gals that were going to be transitioning into civilian life and really didn't quite know what their future held. And so she knew the healing power that horses held after being a horse owner most of her adult life. And so she said, look, we've got these horses that are sitting here with nothing to do. We've got these veterans that, you know, they need some help. And so they put together this small program right outside of Austin in Spicewood, Texas. I found out about them through a little news article that the local news station was doing about them. And they flashed a number up there, and I gave them a call and got involved in what they were doing. And then shortly after, they asked me to be a part of the board because they didn't have currently somebody on the board that had served in the 9/11 timeframe, and wanted a little bit of guidance on where to take the program, and had horsemanship experience. So that was where this all unfolded, and that was back in early 2014. And then in March of 2016, we purchased this property that we're on currently here in Bastrop, and it was essentially a working horse facility. They had been breeding some Andalusian horses here, and we basically took it over. And in the last 3 years, we've grown from helping about 50 veterans and their family members, and this year we will be probably right over 1,000 that will come through the ranch. And we don't just serve the veteran, but we serve the family member, we serve the spouse. And so we've noticed that having a holistic approach of working with the spouse and the children really does help with the overall growth and transition of the veteran themselves. So what we really do go ahead.
No, you guys really have a good setup there, man. I remember when I came there and visited, got to hang out with you, got to visit with Mike, really great guy. Very, very knowledgeable man, and motivated. Great heart, that guy. Great heart. Yeah, man, just a very, very peaceful place. Very peaceful, man. A great place to go.
And that's the great thing, is that's what most people notice as they get here. And one thing I've learned as I've been more involved in doing this is that some people feel pretty paralyzed in their own lives, or they feel paralyzed and stuck in what they're doing. So even just getting in their car and coming here may be the biggest thing they've done in a while. So what a lot of them notice is that when they get here, they kind of plant their feet on the ground and they go, wow, this place is really peaceful. It kind of centers me and grounds me, and then we just kind of work from there. So we may start there, and then exposing them to a horse or getting them around, that type of thing could be very intimidating to them, especially if they've never worked with or been around horses, or have only heard old wife tales about how horses are. And so we just we work up to that. But what we've noticed as well is sometimes we get the wife in the round pen, or we get the kid in the round pen, and then that in a way kind of settles all the energy, and then the veteran wants to get involved. So but what we found as we've been here at the ranch, and we have such a nice facility that we've continued to grow and build to what it is now, is that there are a lot of other veteran service organizations that don't have a brick and mortar facility. They don't have a physical location for people to come to.
Yeah.
And so we have really become the hub of the wheel of people coming here and doing their programming. Or when we have informative events, we may have 15 or 20 organizations that are out there telling people, what they have to offer. Because ultimately, somebody may not resonate with working with the horse, or they may work with them for a while and then they do a certain level of healing and then they're ready for the next thing. They're ready to step off and do something else. And so that's why we believe in having such an involvement in the community and the other organizations to give them something to step off to, whether it is going to go do fly fishing or kayaking or, bike riding or whatever it may be. We have all those organizations here. And then we also will do, typically every quarter or twice a year, we will do a big informative event where we have, like here in Texas, we have the Texas Veterans Land Board, that they will actually help you procure loans and help you procure the ability to buy your own land, and whether you want to just have the land or build on it later.
Oh, that's the veteran.
So we'll have all of those.
And they've got land that is like blocked off just for veterans.
Correct.
Yeah,
or if you have, like, if it's a foreclosure or if it's a particular type of land situation, veterans actually get first dibs on it.
Yeah.
And so these are a lot of things that most people don't know. So we have those events just so we may have upwards of 200 plus veterans out here that are here to come to these just to see what we're doing or to see what else is out there. And something else we've noticed is that most major metropolitan or urban areas, there is some type of veteran organization there to help you, even if it's just to go to your local VA or somebody who helps you apply for your VA benefits. But like here where I'm at in Bastrop, it's a pretty rural county. And what we've noticed is a lot of rural counties don't have very many veteran organizations to help them out. And so we're finding that rural veterans are some of the most isolated. They're some of the most where they feel like they don't really have a voice and don't really have the same benefits that people that live in bigger metropolitan communities. Yep. So that's something else we've tried to do the best we can, is being able to help those guys find organizations that are within a reasonable driving distance or figuring out modes of transportation to get them where they need to go. And so those are some of the other things that we try to encompass here at the ranch. Yeah.
Derek, we're going to have you on here in the next couple of weeks, and we're going to do a Restoration Ranch episode.
Awesome.
So you can I want you to drop all this knowledge. You know what, man? You're absolutely right. You and I, we're Midwest folks, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska. And we are spread out. And, a lot of that has to go back. And, I was talking to my grandpa about this where, World War I, World War II, you came back to your community and they took care of you. Those small communities were doing their own therapy, with their own homegrown heroes. Nowadays we're so, we get out there in places that we can afford. Sometimes going back home, we can't do it. We find little places with little jobs. And, and like you said, we get out there into places where, even VA resources can't reach you. You have to go to them. And that is hard on veterans, especially if you've got issues, like you said, where they don't want to leave the house. They don't want to travel very far. I remember coming back, man, and had to set myself down when I got back to Hawaii and be like, look, the little tiny potholes on some of these roads, they're not IEDs, bro. You know what I mean? So it takes effort, for these veterans, and if you cap in there, an accident with some kind of cognitive, disadvantage, man, you're adding insult to injury almost.
Well, it's like we talked about the other day, is that there is something to it, and maybe at some point they can do a study on it, that there is this magic window of 3 to 5 years that after you kind of transition out, you kind of either have found your way or kind of found your niche, or you're struggling. Mm-hmm. And it's also that time period where I even noticed personally that stuff I hadn't thought about, dreams or whatever it may be, or you replay a certain event over and over in your head, that becomes more prevalent, I think, as the longer you get out. And it's not necessarily right when you get out or right after it's happened, because your mind does a good job of locking that in a box.
Yeah.
And then as time goes by, that box, that lid starts to open a little bit. And so I think there is something to staying on that and making sure that you are connected and getting out there and finding organizations that, that help you realize, okay, well, is this normal or is that not normal? And someone says, yeah, that's pretty normal, but no, that's not. You should probably go, work on that, because,
right.
When you say you go talk to someone, it's still, in a way, it's better than it used to be. But, going and doing traditional talk therapy, quite frankly, there's nothing wrong with that. It has its stigma that they're going to get inside your head, but sometimes you need someone to be objective about that. But there are so many other things that are out there now that can help you, and most organizations do it for free or a very nominal fee for the veteran. So,
Now, Derek, what did horses do? What do horses do for you when,
twofold.
like you were just saying, where situations come up? I've got moments where I have a little bit of anxiety, hits me. What are they giving you while you're there and when you're not there?
Well, I would say that for me, two parts. One is when I got involved with the program, I was able to be with horses, and it was convenient because it wasn't that far of a drive from where I was living at the time and working my corporate job, to go and just see and touch and smell the horses. And there's something about the way a horse smells that, if you grew up around it, it's just like, it's just a wonderful thing, and it brings back good memories. And so just the peacefulness of grooming that horse and brushing their tail and their mane and making them look better, and you can see they're relaxed and they're feeling good because you're giving them the right kind of attention and you're in a good place. That reminded me of just how they have the ability to heal you. There's something in a horse that, kind of takes out the bad and fixes the good, and so for me, that's something that was a reminder of how they used to make me feel growing up. But during that time period, we had a horse by the name of Continuum, who was off the track thoroughbred who had been racing for almost 9 years, which is pretty unheard of, frankly. But he was one of those kind of horses that he was pretty pretty shifty guy, and so he was what they call as a stalker. And he would kind of stay at the back of the pack, and then at the end, that's when he would kind of do his turn and put on his afterburners, and was pretty successful at doing it. And so he was making money for the owners. And so after he got hurt, that injury pretty much retired him, not only because of the injury, it was a hip injury, but also because of his age. It wasn't worth them to rehab him. So he was sold, and we found him in a kill pen out in West Texas, ready to be shipped off to Mexico for slaughter. And there are organizations out there that do a pretty decent job, a really good job actually, of finding these horses and kind of giving them a second chance of not being their demise, because really, quite frankly, they've earned a better retirement than that. And so when we got him, come to find out, he had qualified for the Breeders' Cup, which is the best for life because of all of his winnings and earnings. He came out of St. Barbaro and Charlie's Paradise, which are really famous stallion, and he was one of the most winningest stallions in Canadian horse racing history. And his mom was actually raised by Bob Baffert. So if anybody knows who anyone in horse racing, Bob Baffert's like the Michael Jordan of horse trainers. So Continuum's very first trainer was Bob Baffert, and his very first jockey was Victor Espinoza, who's won the Triple Crown. I mean, he's up there with best of the best as well. So this guy wasn't a slouch. He was, really, in all intents and purposes, a top-notch horse. Mm-hmm. So here he is at our ranch. He's broken down physically. He actually was really sick when we got him, and we didn't even know if we were going to be able to save him. But we were able to, get him healthy again. And I remember when I first started working with him, he didn't even want to get out of his paddock. I mean, I would put his halter and lead rope on and kind of walk him out because I'm going to groom him or just hang out. He's like, no, I'm not doing it, dude. Like, I like this little paddock. I don't have any use for people right now.
Yeah.
And so it took me months just to convince him to go from his paddock to where we could even do anything like just groom him or work on him. And so we got past that. And then finally, I remember one day I had him in the round pen and we were working together. And I was just trying to connect with him and trying to get him to kind of move to his left and right and kind of do it smoothly. And we were trying to get him over an injury. So we were slowly, rehabbing him. I remember there was this moment where I had a bad day at work and I was upset about something. And I was just, you know how you go through those periods where you're angry sometimes and you just don't know why. Yeah. And I was having one of those days and I remember I was mad at him because he just wouldn't work with me. And I remember thinking to myself, dude, if you just let all that past go of people that let you down and people, because there was evidence that he had been abused because one side of his skull had a fracture that looked like somebody had taken a bat or a bar or something and kind of wrapped him with it. Because, because sometimes when these horses are stallions, they're full of piss and vinegar and they got a job to do. And so people will get really physical with him. So I know he had experienced some abuse. And I remember saying to him, like, dude, just let all that go, man. And I remember he like shot me a glance, like, why don't you let go of your crap first and maybe I'll work with you. You can't tell me to let go of something you don't want to let go of. I remember in that moment, I thought, you know what? He's right. And I just let it all go right then and there. And I remember right in that minute, he stopped what he was doing and he just walked right to the center of the round pen. And it was like he was ready to connect. And I thought, God, what a powerful thing. So being able to have that for me and Champ, unfortunately passed away last September. He was an old warrior. I mean, when you saw his horse, he had scars and, battle bruises. And I mean, he was just your typical, war fighter when it came to his past professional career. And so he kind of succumbed to some injuries that we really couldn't do anything about. But anyways, he has a legacy here, and he's really the horse that got me into all this, got me into doing what I'm doing, and I'll always be thankful to him for that. And so what I try to do is I don't try to mimic that because it's kind of like lightning in a bottle. Yeah. But what I try to do is set it up to where people can experience that on their own. And we have horses from all walks of life that have had professional careers. Some have been, worked with our local mounted border police. Have worked with being professional dressage and hunter jumper horses and former professional rodeo horses. And they're here and they all have a new lease on life because they get what they do. They really do. Yeah. And there are horses that when there are certain veterans that'll come up that are so closed off, I think to myself, man, I don't know what I'm going to do today. Like, I don't know who I'm going to pair this person up with. And next thing you know, there'll be a horse that's pushing at his gate. Or just being louder than normal.
Got the answer.
I go, okay, well, I guess he's signed up. And next thing you know, that person gets in a round pen and they're pensive or they're whatever. And this horse just, they emote a certain level of confidence, but also tenderness that person opens up. And so that's really what it's all about. And once you've seen that firsthand, like you're hooked for life. Like there won't be anything like that, seeing that veteran. And we have veterans that have been coming for years now. And I've seen them grow. I've seen their kids grow up. And you see a real change in them. And if you took a picture of how they were then and how they are now, it's like, it's night or day. And we have the horses to thank for that. And like you talked about, it's not about me. It's about these horses and what they're able to do. Yeah. And it really is a balance, because without the horses, we don't have the healing. But without the veterans willing to come out here and willing to do something that's outside their comfort zone, it doesn't give the horses something to do. So it really is as an old general told me, it's a self-licking ice cream cone, right? It just works. Right. It just works. So,
well, hey, you know what, Derek, I'll tell you, man, it's like, almost everybody I know that are horsemen or horsewomen, they have a way. I mean, even with people, they kind of have a way, like a gentle way. Right. And, when you say that, man, I do think back, to the, before I saw you with horses, deployment, ranger school, stuff like that, times after, and the thing is, that's who you are. You know what I mean? Like you said, it was your, it was your family upbringing. It's the environment you lived in. But the thing is, it took hold of you.
Right.
And transformed you. And man, I'm glad that you were in the position to accept that.
Right.
To take that. It's like, hey, drop your stuff and let's get to work. That's an amazing point, man.
When you've been going and going and going and going, and I look at my entire 20s were dedicated to training and graduating from schools and getting all of the training that you needed to have the legitimacy to go off and then say, okay, you're going to be a platoon leader. Well, a lot of people think that you go to college and you go to a couple of schools and you get to become a platoon leader. But there's so much more to it than that. And so then when you get into that position of having that once in a lifetime opportunity to lead troops in the Korengal, for instance, you're so focused on that. And then you don't really turn that off because you're still in the military, you're still training for other deployments. And then I went right from that to going to a corporate job, and my client was Apple, which they're no picnic when it comes to the op tempo and what they require of their, contract manufacturers. And we were building the first computer that they'd ever built in the United States in like almost 30 years. So their level of expectation is up here. So I went from one fire to another, and then from that, you're just on that wheel of expectation for yourself and others. You don't really turn that off. So then when you start dealing with the emotional and physical ramifications of that and how it impacts your relationships as well, you're ready to, figure out some way of balancing all that. And for me, working with these forces and being able to be the conduit, as I say, has really helped me, work on my own stuff. But I don't have to call it working on my own stuff because I just make everyone else the focus. It's all about them. So, that's what's helped me.
Self-aware, man. You're self-aware.
Yeah. So.
Hey, so out of all this, man, what lessons learned? What did you learn out of all this?
Well, I think for me, and something that I try to impart on a lot of veterans that I talk to either on the phone or come out here, is that you should be really proud of your military service.
Yeah, absolutely.
And regardless of where your civilian service takes you, even if you end up being, the night stalking guy at FedEx, whatever, you've earned that recognition, and you don't hesitate to help, others around you and help them, because just like your podcast say, we all have a servant's heart. We all have, or else we wouldn't have joined. We wouldn't have joined and have that desire to help others or to help people across this world who can't defend themselves. And not only being a part of something bigger than yourself, you're there to help. And sometimes you got to be the guy who's kicking in doors and killing the bad guys, because that's part of helping. But that transcends into something else later on. And it's perfectly healthy to be nostalgic about your service.
Yeah.
But those guys that I talk to who think they peaked in life because the greatest thing they ever accomplished was while they were deployed or while they were in the military. And there are plenty of ways for, those types of heroes to get involved in their communities and go out and be a part of something and feel like you are making progress on your professional and personal development. And I think society puts too much focus on wealth as being a sign of success. And there are a lot of people out there that I personally hold in high regard that have made huge impacts on my life that are not rich, that are not out there movers and shakers in the corporate world.
Yep.
And I know some old cowboys that I have the most respect for. A lot of people would look at them and say, those guys don't have anything. But at the same time, there are people all around the world that would pay a lot of money to live on a slice of heaven that they live on, or go and do what they do every day. So it's all about perspective and not putting your focus on those things. But, I always say too, is be the version of yourself that you were willing to go out and fight and die for. And I always think about,
that's strong, man.
Yeah.
That's strong. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you kind of lose that perspective sometimes about what am I doing with my life? Or, I had this identity, I had a rank, I had all these cool guy badges that I could wear, and people right away knew who I was from that standpoint. You come out here and you go to McDonald's and order a sandwich, no one has any idea who you are. Or you get mistreated a little bit, or you get ignored, and you think to yourself, you know who I am? And here I am, I can't even get, my supersized fry, whatever. So that's the stuff you kind of got to let go of.
Yeah.
And, I feel like we live in a society that one half of the country gets it, and it will always be indebted to a service member, and there's the other half that doesn't. And I don't know if it's that polarized, but there's a big enough portion that I think that there are guys that go certain places and feel like, they're pretty much dry or lit when it compares to what they did and where they are in their life now. And there are a lot of guys who come back broken. I know I certainly didn't come back the same. I may have 10 fingers and 10 toes, but I didn't come back the same.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand that. And then you could have 10 people that experience the same exact thing over there, the same exact firefight, the same IED, the same whatever. And all 10 of them are going to respond differently. And some society may say, well, that guy came out unfazed. Why is that guy over there all jacked up? He's just, playing his, trying to play up and get some type of attention over it. But the studies show that all of our brains react differently. And maybe that guy is super stoic about it. He's not dealing with it now, but he may deal with it in 10 years. And that guy's dealing with it now will be better off than the other guy is 10 years from now. So, there's all kinds of things that I try to put in perspective for people to see that. And, in other words, just be proud of who you are and try to be a pillar in your community. It's like you said something the other day that resonated with me, is that, we need leaders more now out here in the civilian world than we did when we were in the Army. And leadership and standing up for what's right, or standing up for what you believe in, is not something that's commonplace. And so I think it's important for those that those NCOs, those officers, whether, regardless of rank, to stand up and be counted, because it's important to do that.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that are perfectly fine with just sitting in the shadows and letting things just develop, and that's not always a good thing.
Right. Well, man, there's a lot of, I look at my cohort, first sergeants and, that retired, and, sergeant major friends, really good friends that I had, that are sergeant majors and that are retired. I hate to put their feet to the fire, but this really is the time for them to come out,
right,
and start to, one, shake off the cloak of, of misunderstanding that comes with them.
Yeah.
Because I think the rank itself brings a cloak of misunderstanding.
Yeah.
If you shake that off and you can be like, hey, hey guys, gals, you're looking at me, I'm my mom's son. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm a real person. I got, and, it wasn't just a career, it was my life. And,
right.
And the thing is, if soldiers or Marines or any, seamen, anybody that, you serve with, or you considered yourself a leader of them and you respect them, then it doesn't matter who they are now. You owe it to them. They all look the same. They're from the same place. They smell the same. Well, maybe the Navy don't, but but I'm just saying, man, it's like, it doesn't matter. And we've got to start something. If it takes a big dog coming in to get people going, then that's what it takes. I'm willing to do anything. That's why I'm doing this podcast, man. Right. It's like I'll dance a jig if that's what it takes. So nobody wants to see that shit.
I don't know, maybe.
No, they don't.
A viral sensation.
That's crazy talk, man.
Top doing the jig.
Yeah.
But no, I think that in this day and age, because this is the format for it, and I'm here kind of just telling, pieces of myself, there are a lot of veterans who come here and don't think they're worthy, or they say, well, I didn't do that. I was in the Army for 4 years in the 80s. I didn't see anything, or I was in the Navy and I never left a ship, or whatever. That stuff doesn't really matter. And I try to find that a balance, that I give enough of my story that the people see the legitimacy of what I'm doing, but I don't give it out so that it's my my ORB, and it's designed to intimidate people. And I think that we do too much of that. And if you look on social media and you see a lot of these viral or these famous veteran, Black Rifle Coffee or all those kind of people, there's nothing wrong with it. But in a way, they create these images of themselves that the average military veteran is not going to live up to. And I think they find that daunting too, that unless they have a Purple Heart or unless they have some type of physical wounds or they have whatever, that they're not going to be accepted as being legitimate in this world that we're in. And this community is so much larger than that. Right. And so that stuff doesn't matter. Even if you got in trouble while you were in, I mean, I got in trouble while I was in. I mean, it happens. So you just deal with that. But be proud of that. And I'm not saying go out and be one of those guys that's stolen valor type thing, but just own what you did. There's no reason to be ashamed of that. And I think there are a lot of guys who feel that, and so they don't want to get involved. And quite frankly, that doesn't really matter. We're trying to build a community like with this podcast, and this every physical way that we can get out to the world, into the communities of what we're trying to build. I'll tell you, since you and I talked the other day about doing this, I've reached out to guys I haven't reached out into a long time about doing this. And I'm thinking to myself, why haven't I reached out just to talk to them and catch up? And so it's allowed me to connect to some guys, and like Dan Nelson, I haven't seen Dan in a long time, but, we have some opportunities now with what I'm doing and what he's doing for us to do some joint collaborations together and that's awesome. Yeah, it is. And that connects people that are never going to be connected. And so that's what I'm excited about, is just all of the opportunity that's coming up, and doing stuff with the Aaron Butler Foundation, and what Sergeant Manilla's doing, and everyone else. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff brewing. There's so many intersecting lines. It's no accident that we're doing what we're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's almost like perfect storm.
Yep.
And I really like that. I like it.
Which is what you have coined our unit's mission in Korengal more than once.
The perfect storm, dude. It was, man. You throw Mark in there. You throw you, Reed, Martell.
Yeah.
Everybody, man. It was everybody had an amazing part of it. So it's definitely it is a badass part of life. I will say this, and I don't, and I should have given it more credit, but I will say that Major Moretti now.
At the time, Captain Moretti gave me the autonomy and gave me the confidence to go out and do a lot of stuff that maybe some company commanders would have wanted to have more physical presence, being there physically doing it, or if I said I need this, that, and the other, he never second guessed it. And that is something that I've always remembered. If I've ever had people that have been working for me, that if they wanted to do something or wanted to approach something from a little bit different angle than what I was envisioning, that I should try to support that as best I can. And I'll always be thankful that he had that trust in me to do that. And the same with, Brandon, Lieutenant Bettis at the time, he, same thing, when the commander was out of pocket for whatever, he was like, man, whatever you need, whatever you want to do, that was important. And the same thing, even at the battalion and brigade level. Even the battalion commander, he was extremely supportive of what we were doing, and would call and say, what do you need? That's the best thing you can hear, is like, what do you need? And if you don't have it, they're going to figure out a way to get it to you. And even Colonel George at the time, when he would come visit, same thing. What do you need? You're doing amazing things, and supporting like that. So to have a command structure, because I know for a fact, I even experienced later in my career, you don't always have that. That is not guaranteed. Right. So the fact that we had that, and even you being able to support what I was doing, and I think that there wasn't an accident that we had a history before all that kicked off, because there were some things that you and I went through. When the commander was on R&R, that was some tough stuff that we got through together. So like you said, it was all the way it was supposed to be.
Everybody doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And looking out for each other, man.
Yep.
That's I'm trying to get everybody on the same sheet of music out here, man. This is a battle.
It'll happen.
Yep,
it is.
But hey, Derek, we're gonna have you back on here again, man. We're gonna do Restoration Ranch. All right. But this is my challenge to you, because you've come on here, you've opened up, you brought out some really good points, and I hope people are listening to some of these things that Derek's talking about, because these things can change your life. So you need to listen to this again and again until you start getting it. But I want you to come on, man. If you start to see something out there as you're traveling around and meeting veterans, if you start to see a place where it's starting to be prevalent friction out there across the veteran community, come up on the net, man, so we can do an episode and talk about it.
And I gotta say, I'm loving this co-hosting gig, man. Like, this is good. I hope the Aussies have heard enough to make a decision on an invite, because I feel like we hit on some pretty cool things today.
I think you're just trying to get an in booth, like a flight down there.
Yeah, what is that Australian Airlines? Maybe that's what I'm trying to do, is get an invite. What's it, Kwanzaa?
I don't even know.
I think that's what it is.
I had one of my old FOs. He went to Australia and did college when it was done. He loved it over there, man. I would love to go over there, spend a year or so.
Qantas. I was close. Qantas. Yeah, Qantas. Yeah, I mean, it's I had one of my RIs, actually. Well, you may have not known him, but he was an RI and was also in regiment, and they do some rotations down there, and that's where he met his wife.
Yeah.
So he was a big fan of Australia. Yeah.
Oh,
cool beans.
Well, hey, Derek, thank you for coming on the show, man. And
my pleasure.
Like I said, man, we're going to do it again, and we'll talk some more. We need to get back on a regular schedule now that my classes are getting a little bit thinner.
Yeah, I'm all about that.
And once again, man, if you got you got some veterans that you think they could use the podcast, you think that either it would help them, maybe like you said, it's like there's different resources that you have to go to heal. It's levels of magnitude until you get back to as close to zero as you can to normal. If you find a veteran out there that you think could use the podcast, or they listen to it and they say, hey, I kind of like this, have them reach out, man.
I will, and I'm working on a couple of my buddies who I think would be a wealth of information for what they've gone out and doing in their lives, and it's pretty, diverse in what they're doing. And like you said, just the whole purpose of this is that we just want this to resonate with even if it's just one person, to realize they're not alone, and that there are things out there, and that whatever they're going through, it's just like, when I was going through Ranger School, as tough as it was, and I feel like in a lot of ways, there's some things you learn there you won't learn anywhere else, for me personally. But I knew that no matter what they put us through, they couldn't keep the sun from going down or coming up. And so when you're going through something, it's not forever. And don't think that doing something permanent is going to help with the temporary solution. They say permanent solution for a temporary problem, and that's why we're here. So, all right, man.
Hey, what do you got? What do you got for the safety brief, man?
Oh man, one of my favorites is, stay out of the hospital, the news, and jail. And if you end up in jail, establish dominance quickly. And if you seriously do anything stupid that's going to have to make me wake up in the middle of the night, I'll be sure they send you to Fort Irwin to be out for.
I like that, man. I like that. Hey, Derek, thanks for joining us today, man. And like I said, we're going to have you back on here, and we'll have some fun.
Everybody have a wonderful day and a great weekend.
Yep. Hey, everybody, thank you for joining us today here on Heart of Volunteer Veterans Podcast. Hey, this was episode 021 with Derek Knapp. Hey, listen to this thing, share it, comment on it, like it, and tell your buddies. If you're not, you're wrong. All right. So, hey, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and don't forget to get after it. Heart of a Volunteer, copyright 2019.